First day of no masks in the UAE, in Dubai, where I am. The government has now given us the option not to wear masks if we feel like it. That seems like a long time. And I must say, I felt quite naked on the school run this morning. I'm Frank Kane. The crude oil price is wobbling around the $85 band for Brent amid growing speculation that there will be cuts at next week's OPEC Plus meeting. We'll be looking in detail at that a bit later. But first, I want to get some views from our panelists on the quite extraordinary events yesterday. 3 simultaneous leaks in Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic. Javier Blas and Bloomberg quoted Ian Fleming, the James Bond author, as saying, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, the third time is enemy action. So let me go first of all to Rustin Edwards, head of fuel oil procurement for Euronav in Switzerland. Welcome, Rustin. Welcome again.
Good morning.
Tell me, what do you think has gone on here? Are the Russians destroying their own pipelines? The Russian trolls are saying that Biden did it, though that's hard to credit. But there was nothing coming through these pipelines anyway, was there? So how does it affect the European energy equation as we come up to what will be a critical winter?
Well, even if there was just an earthquake, as initially surmised by the Swedish seismologists when they were analyzing what had happened, you have infrastructure which is deep underwater that is now ruptured, and so that needs to be repaired. And so that, in any case, that would be a more bullish sentiment for nat gas prices into Europe, because now a logistics flow is no longer available. You couple it with the geopolitical issues going on with Ukraine and Russia. And because not only did that happen yesterday, but then you had Gazprom threatening to put sanctions on naphtha gas on the transits because of a payment dispute that's being arbitrated right now in the World Court. So you got a double-headed impact of the damage to the infrastructure and then the court case pending here.
Yeah. I must say, I'm always shocked and surprised when I learn again that Russian gas is still moving through Ukraine, I have to say, and they're both going off to arbitration in Switzerland, aren't they? It seems quite a contrast to what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. But Vladimir Langhamer, Managing Director for Europe and Africa at the Prax Group in London, give me your assessment, if you would, of how ready Europe is for the coming winter. The US seems to be maxed out in terms of energy supplies to Europe. We had the German Chancellor in the Gulf last week. Olaf Scholz was in the Gulf last week. And I think he got some joy, didn't he, from the UAE and Qatar. But will Europe have enough energy this winter?
I believe it will. I mean, if you look at the fill rates of the storages, it does. At the end of the day, it all depends on the winter. I colloquially always say the Russians have won large wars always due to winter. And if it will be a tough winter, then we might have a bigger problem than if it will be a milder winter. I mean, the markets have reacted to yesterday's events. I mean, I'm looking at the UK gas, obviously it's a UK-based industry group. They shot almost 30%. So it did spook the markets. What does it mean long term? In technical terms, there was nothing flowing through the pipeline, and there is enough capacity to move enough gas, to Europe elsewhere, right? I mean, you still, as you mentioned, they're still going through the old pipeline through Ukraine. You have the South Stream. I think there are actually still options for Europe to get gas if they want more. Algeria, if you look at the flows, actually haven't been supplying Europe much in recent years. And I think there's a lot of efforts to try to put regasification capacity either where it should be, because there's enough, but in the wrong places potentially, and then increase interconnector pipelines in Europe so you can move gas from one place to another.
Right, and there's gas coming from Azerbaijan and the Caspian too, isn't there? But will all that added together, aggregated, will that make up for the loss of Russian gas over the winter? Vladimir?
Well, on aggregate, I don't think it would, but there's enough in the storages. So really, and I think it's the right thing to say is this winter is probably safe. It's more about the next winter, right? And I think there will be also, you have a demand destruction. People talk about up to 10 to 15% of demand destruction and savings, if you want. It is all over the newspapers, not only UK, but I do read some of the German-speaking ones, and people do speak about turning down their thermometers. So I think there's little steps, but they do compound to a number where it actually could, to large numbers, substitute to a certain degree the Russian gas, which of course then will be amalgamated by everything I mentioned before. It's more gas coming from somewhere else.
Okay. Rustin, give me a quick take on what the Americans are doing. You say that they're maxed out on gas, are they?
Well, I think the export infrastructure is currently maxed out. I haven't seen any updates on the Freepoint export facility off Galveston, if that's actually come back online. They had their incident, which happened a few months back, and they were supposed to be down for 120 days. So technically, they should be coming back online here in October or November. But there's been no updates as to what they're doing. So I think at this point, it is a matter of just getting logistics to move that gas from point A to point B. And you've got to think of all the other flows that are moving around as well. So, I think, with the US and their current production profile, we haven't seen any real expansion in the shale fields. So there's no incremental extra gas coming online there. So I think things are going to be fairly static in the US for the time being.
Right. So the US is not riding to the rescue. Tom Walsh, a doctoral research student and member of the Institute of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at the University of Durham up there in the northeast of England. Tom, welcome back. Give me some sort of geopolitical context here, would you, on the Nord Stream leaks? Is Putin burning his bridges with Europe completely? If he's destroying his own energy facilities, and we have to stress that hasn't been proven yet, is that a sign that he's using the nuclear option in energy too, and he's given up on Europe entirely? Give me your take on that.
Well, I think we're in a lot of doubt at the moment. If we had an easy answer, it would be out in the public. But I think from a geopolitical perspective, both the United States and Russia, if they have intelligence on this, will be keeping it close to their chest for now, for understandable reasons. I think I often I think it might potentially be dangerous to speculate until we have more information on what's actually happening. I read a few things over the last day. People genuinely very worried about this. Not necessarily, I mean, as Vlad and Rustin were saying, this wasn't functional, the pipeline, in any sense at the moment. So it won't make a big impact there. But it does look like it could have been an explosion, from a device.
Three explosions.
Three explosions, and the chances of that being anybody but a state actor are slim to none. So we need to wait until more data comes out. The one thing I would say is, obviously, the Baltic pipeline is not so far away and has opened around the same time, and I think that will worry Europe a lot, considering Norway provides so much gas. Yeah.
So the possibility is that this was kind of a warning shot. This won't do any damage, but the Baltic pipeline certainly would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think it's surely not just a coincidence that it was basically the same day that pipeline opened. I think it was.
Yeah. We live in complicated times. Let me move on to have a closer look at the oil market and the OPEC plus meeting coming up next week on the 5th of October. The prospect of cuts is becoming quite prominent. UBS, JP Morgan, and others are all talking about cuts, asking for cuts even, ranging from 500,000 to 1 million barrels. So the prospect of cuts seems to be out there, but I don't think it's really reflected yet in the price, is it? You know, the price hasn't responded to this, you know, kind of speculation that there will be cuts. So, Rustin, how do you think OPEC plus policymakers are thinking now? What's most on their minds? Is it supply fears because of the Ukraine situation, with the European ban on Russian oil coming into effect in December, I believe? Or is it demand destruction because of the threat of recession, rising interest rates, inflation, etc.? What, you know, which of those is motivating them more?
Well, I mean, demand is always the final in my opinion, has always been the final arbiter of price, because that is, you know, what is somebody willing to pay for some good at some location? I think OPEC has a problem in that they're underproducing by 3.2 to 3.5 million barrels, depending on who you want to talk to. So if they cut 1 million barrels, it doesn't change the supply and demand balance because they're already underproducing. I mean, if OPEC really wanted to make an impact to the market, they'd have to make a cut of about 4 million barrels. And then that would just bring them aligned to their current production level.
Right.
So it's kind of I think the talk of any cuts being done by OPEC are window dressing on a window that's already broken. And I don't think that they'll have any real impact to the market. I mean, you already see that a lot of banks are downgrading their price forecast for Brent crude. Goldman Sachs dropped it from 120 to 108. You know, headlines out of APEC in Singapore with Trafigura are talking that we won't see $100 crude for the rest of the year. So that doesn't tell you that there's some positive developments on the trader side that are looking at there's going to be a problem with OPEC, or OPEC's really going to cut production and really reduce supply to the marketplace. When you look at the sanctions going on to Russia, you know, freight markets tell you a very big story about what's going on. And traders bidding up the FFA markets for tankers for both for VLCCs and Suezmaxes shows you that they think that there'll be enough capacity engaged in the Russian trade to keep oil markets, freight markets tight. Thus, we're seeing an acceleration in prices for all wet freight to handle that flow on longer haul voyages.
Right, all going eastward, I presume.
Oh, but yeah, potentially all going eastward, because east of Suez, there's no sanction against Russia. So it's kind of everybody has to remember that the European and United States sanctions are European and United States delivery. You can deliver that oil anywhere else in the world.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Vladimir, how should traders be positioning themselves ahead of the OPEC plus meeting? We just heard Rustin say that 4 million barrels cuts might make a difference to the price, but that seems rather unlikely to me. All the upward limit so far of the speculation has been 1 million barrels. What level of cuts would there have to be to make a difference to the current price, do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It would have to be substantial. I think the major topic, and that's the price where we are. I mean, you know, we haven't. It's not so long we've been in over 100, and I think it's not because of additional supply that this has come to 85. It's the fear of the demand destruction through lower economic activity. And also, I think OPEC needs to balance that not only with this, but also the strength of dollar. Because many of the countries, even in the East, are subsidizing this, and this is hurting their budgets a lot on top. So I think there will be substantial. To be honest, I don't really think OPEC will react in that manner because long term, or there might be a short gain where the market would react, but long term, that would just exacerbate the situation that is out there already. Right. And I think they have a balancing act, and they've been pretty good in the balancing act in the last, I'd say, 2 years. Yeah, and they might say, okay, I do 1 million, and I'll look again next month. Because they've really been more a central bank of oil than countries, and they rather do it with small cuts and managing it on a smaller scale than aiming for 100 in a big shot. That's my assessment.
Yeah. Of course, OPEC and OPEC Plus says that it never looks at the oil price, does it? It's it's always about balancing supply and demand. But of course, the individual countries that make up OPEC and OPEC Plus, they have a keen interest in the oil price, don't they? Because it funds their national budgets and exchequers. But if there were cuts, and I get your skepticism about both the scale of them and what effect they would have, how would they fall? Because as Rustin pointed out, 3.5 million barrels down on the official quotas anyway. Which countries could make a big cuts that would make a difference? Vladimir.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's not going to be the smaller countries. It's not going to be Nigeria that's already underproducing. So really, you're looking again at a handful of countries, and one of those is actually Russia. Because let's not forget, this is a coordinated effort with OPEC Plus or within OPEC Plus. Now, how likely is that, if Saudi Arabia, for example, would theoretically want to cut, significantly 1.5 million, I'm sure they would want some of the other big producers to do the same and not to take the brunt of the pain, let's say, themselves. Now,
they did do this, didn't they, in 2021, the surprise New Year cut, if you recall, where they threw in 1 million barrels of their own.
Yeah, but again, it was a bit artificial. I mean, they weren't able to produce it in the first place, so they kind of informed the market about things that already happened in a sense.
Right.
But let's assume, who would persuade now Russia to cut 2 million? Well, maybe it might be convenient for Russia just to say, okay, we cut, because they wouldn't be able to export it anyway. So there is a lot of things in play. I think, I don't expect a big headline. I would expect a cut, but not a big headline. And if nothing happens, they'll do the same in a month.
Right. Tom, any thoughts on this about the unity of OPEC Plus, and can they hang together around the issue of cuts?
Not anything more than Vladimir and Rustin have already told us, I don't
think. Okay, good man. Let's look at one of the factors that goes into the OPEC deliberations, the OPEC plus deliberations, and that's something that they've been pondering over recent months. The possibility that more barrels could come from Iran as the JCPOA talks stumble on. But that possibility seems to have receded now with renewed violence on the streets of Iran. Can we call up today's poll question, please? Because I would like to discuss this. With the brutal repression of civilian protests on the streets of Iran every day, nobody in the West can be seen to do a deal with Tehran that would get Iranian oil flowing again to international markets this year. And it's a straightforward single choice. You either agree that there is no possibility of Iranian oil coming back on the market in light of the situation in the country, or you disagree. You think that there will be a JCPOA deal. So please vote on that one. So let me ask Tom Walsh about that. Explain to me the current geopolitics of the Iranian talks, would you, Tom, please? Where are we? What's the likelihood of a deal? Is it receding, as I've suggested there? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would say that what we've seen is kind of an initial period of hope, potentially, when Biden came into power, followed by a decline, followed by an up again, and a decline now again with these protests. And I think the importance of these protests can't be underplayed and undermined. It's spreading all the way across Iran, and I think the secret hope of the American establishment is always that some kind of change in the leadership occurs. I also think that within discussions, both Iran and America have been making demands that probably just too excessive or sort of outside of the scope of the JCPOA and being brought into it. It's interesting to me though that the poll question, for example, I mean, I agreed with that statement. You know, I don't think Western actors can be seen to be supporting the opening up of Iran in any way, essentially at the moment. Right. But when you look at Western relationships with other Middle Eastern actors who have similar human rights issues, it doesn't seem to apply. But Iran is a singular case.
Right. Tom, let me stay with you for a moment, because one of the factors that will have to be taken into account here is the situation in Yemen, where the ceasefire is due to end over the weekend, I believe, the 2nd of October.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, that has a direct bearing, doesn't it? This is one of those other factors, you know, that's kind of hovering over the JCPOA talks too. The Iran's inclination to cause trouble in other parts of the Middle East. What's your take on that? Will the ceasefire be renewed? What happens if it's not?
Well, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I'll try and do it as concisely as possible. But I absolutely hope so. I think Western actors hope so. I think the whole of the Middle East hopes so, that the ceasefire is renewed. I've watched this conflict since its very beginning in 2015, and I've never been able to predict what's going to happen next. But I'm hopeful. I think that the Saudis need to commit more to properly opening up the port of Hodeidah and the airport in a more full and forthright way. And I think on the other side, the Houthis need to properly stop militarism, because they haven't, and also their unwillingness to negotiate needs to be looked at. There was another part of your question about the Iranian involvement in Yemen. Of course, that has steadily grown since the conflict began. My opinion of it, though, is that Yemen doesn't represent that much geostrategic importance to Iran. And so their steadily increasing involvement has amounted to not very much financially, and has been a good way of using their so-called involvement as leverage in JCPOA discussions.
Okay.
So sort of going, hang on, we'll get out of Yemen actually it doesn't matter that much to them. And I really do believe that.
Okay, interesting. Rustin, JCPOA deal dead in the water now, is it?
I don't think Biden has much chance of getting something done, especially with the midterm elections coming up in another month and a half. So all the campaigning is well underway for that, and the table's being set on who's going to get into the U.S. Congress. And I think if he doesn't have a supportive Congress, he won't be able to get anything done with JCPOA. So I think it is kind of dead in the water. However, Iranian oil is still flowing to international markets. I mean, so let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah,
it's still out there. It's still shifting. It's still pumping and still being delivered. I think Iran's biggest concern they have is the fact that some of the tonnage that's been used to move Iranian oil has now shifted into the Russian trade, because the Russian trade is a bit more lucrative.
Right. Vladimir, what from a trading perspective, are traders preparing for the imminent return of Iranian oil anytime soon?
To be honest, I'm not so close to trading anymore, so more refining. But I think Iran was on and off. Again, to go back to our discussion previous, it is on the minds of OPEC as well, because I'm sure that the chance of Iran, of the agreement being revised by West is higher at $120 than it's at, $80 to $70, right? And the same thinking is certainly OPEC. So they don't want to overplay, because there are still pockets of additional supply that, under very difficult circumstances, but hey, we've seen even kind of more strength, more strong things in the last 2 years. So I think it's a wait and see. It's really, if I could give a guess, and my personal opinion is nobody's betting on this. There have been many occasions where maybe people have bet money on it and it didn't work out. one way or the other. I don't think, until it happens, it will have an impact. And also it will not happen from one day to another. Yeah, I mean, Rustin was saying, I think the pool of ships that is willing and able to transport sanctioned material, which will now increase by all the Russian material, really. It's not just sanction on oil, but it's sanction on insurance and shipping that is actually EU and US has put in. Will not increase substantially, and therefore there will be a big competition. So I think it will start to hurt both sides potentially, because they will start to discount even more in order to move to oil.
Tom Walsh, can I get a view from you on a regional political development? Saudi Arabia yesterday announced that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman would take over from his father, the King Salman, as Prime Minister. What are we to read into that? Is that just a recognition of the de facto reality, the existing state of affairs, or do you think there's something more imminent in the wind?
Well, I mean, it's no secret that King Salman's getting older, and for a long time has been ceding power to MBS. I think the change in the role that MBS has in terms is nominal, really. I think he's had a lot of power for many years, and we already know basically that MBS will lead Saudi Arabia before too long. So I wish I could say more about it, but really, I've seen the concentration of power grow and grow with MBS, and I just think this is another nice title he can add to his long list.
Yeah, the prime ministership in Saudi Arabia traditionally goes to the king, so I guess the question is how long, really. Well, look, we've got for the last bit of today's show, we've got two people in London, in the UK. Tom is up in County Durham, and Vladimir in London, in that benighted country, that chaotic country. I'd like to get a feel from you, people on the ground. I mean, from me here in Dubai, looking at it, nice, safe, stable Dubai, it looks like absolute chaos. The IMF taking the unprecedented step of having a go at a G8 country over its economic policy. This is just unprecedented, isn't it? Vladimir, what's it like in London?
Well, I think the situation on the ground, it didn't immediately change. I think people are even more, say, confused or insecure, obviously, because there is a lot of talk even before, obviously, the kind of energy crisis, cost of living crisis, really is on top of, I think, most people's minds. So, I think the markets have reacted potentially unpredictably, or not the way that obviously the chancellor would predict, more in the strength of the move than the direction. And if this will add to pressure on the cost of living, then there will need to be some kind of a reaction. I think it's, as you say, it's unprecedented. I think it's too early to say really how this pans out. The government, wants to grow the economy, and they believe this is the best way to do that. Right. Now, with the first statement, I don't think anyone can disagree. So it's not the what, it's about the how, and they've chosen a way which seems to not to be keenly taken by the market.
Right, sure. Tom, up there in Blue Wall country, have people got tired of Liz Truss as Prime Minister already?
Absolutely.
After 2 weeks.
and tired of a series of frankly incompetent Tory governments. I mean, the County Durham is a an area that experiences a lot of poverty, the highest number of food banks, high levels of addiction, high levels of homelessness, and they are facing a cold winter. And so this isn't a simple economic consideration in a meta sense. This is something terrifying people on the ground in County Durham. So it's a worrying winter ahead for the working class people of the northeast.
Rustin, what do the sober, fiscally prudent citizens of Switzerland think about what's going on in the UK? Are they tutting and being sympathetic?
I don't think they're being sympathetic at all. I think Switzerland is always grounded in its neutrality. And I think it's kind of a bit of indifference. I mean, we've been experiencing, a strengthening in the Swiss franc along with the US dollar. We're almost kind of lockstep with the US dollar. As the US dollar goes up, the Swiss franc goes up, although the US dollar is outpacing the Swiss franc currently. But our central bank has raised interest rates, so we're no longer negative interest rates, we're positive interest rates now from the Swiss central bank. I think that will continue on to be more defensive here in Switzerland. It's great when you're a safe haven because everybody wants to own your currency, but which makes our imports a bit cheaper.
Right. Can we call up the poll question result, please? All right. Wow, split down the middle. I'm very surprised at that. We must dig deeper into that the next time, but because we've run out of time now. But I'd like to thank all three of you, Tom, Vladimir, Rustin, for your participation. I think that was a good conversation. Look forward to speaking to you again sometime soon. Thanks a lot.
I'm here.